Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Scott, for joining us. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us how you went from working at a big company like Procter Gamble to deciding to start a company to make PC software, which was sort of, that was like deciding to start a web startup today.
Well, my wife and I moved out in 1980, and I was working at Bain, and she eventually got a job in software publishing. So I got to see what a small software company was like. And I coded a little bit when I was in high school. I hadn't done any since, so I got intrigued by all that. And then one day, she complained about doing the bills. She's very good at it. It wasn't a problem thing, it just was a hassle. You know, it was redundant, recurring clerical work that she did for our joint checking account. It occurred to me, this sounds like a classic P&G style business. You try to find a problem that everybody has, whether it's deodorant or laundry or diapering babies. And then where can you use technology to solve that problem better than it's ever been solved before? And it struck me that PCs, even as feeble as they were in 1983 and 82, could actually do a good job of this because it's just redundant calculation of data storage. So that started me on the journey first to build something for her, and then to say, and then to explore, is this actually a large problem that a lot of people have that we can go solve? So that's how it started.
And I remember those days, so I know that McCracken had lots of competition. It did not succeed because it was the only option people had. But did it succeed because you had a better product, or were there other things you did as a startup that helped you get off to a good start?
Yeah, that's right. There were a couple dozen personal finance software products already on the market. Some were broadly sold. So we had the last mover advantage. But our approach was very different. Those products were all loaded up on features. Back then the view was the more features the better. So they would do balance sheets, graphs, budgets, assets, liabilities, investments. They do all that stuff. But we went in to understand customers fresh. I started calling households in Palo Alto and Winnetka just on phone calls to find out what did you actually do with your finances. And what was the problem, what was the pain, what was the hassle. And what we learned from that is most people did very few things in their finances. Just the basics, pay bills, figure out how much money you have. And they wanted it to be fast and easy, because nobody likes doing this stuff. And there wasn't a single competitor who was doing it. Their products were big, complicated, and slow. So where they made an aircraft carrier, we made a speed carrier. And the purpose of Quicken was single-minded, save the time and hassle.
This was the era of MS-DOS, but you couldn't make it particularly beautiful at the start, I assume.
Yeah, it wasn't, but he was also making it understandable, because we started doing testing, software testing, what's now called usability testing. We didn't have a word for it back then. But we get people from the Palo Alto Junior League to come by, and we'd give them the software on a computer. These were non-computer users. They'd never touched a PC. And we'd say, now, write and print a check. And they had to figure out how to do it. And they got stuck, and they had problems, and we'd watch, and we'd inquire what was going on. And then we'd go back and redesign it, and then a week later, try again. And so one thing that we applied was an idea that I had taken from the Lisa development team, which was to make the screens, I mean, it's obvious today, back then nobody had done it. Make the screens look like the real thing. So our data entry screen looked like a check. The database screen looked like a check register. So, and we did that in the 80-character green screen. So you can use design to make things intuitive, hence the name of the company, even when you only had 80-character green screen.
And this was at a time, I mean, when the average American did not have a computer. I mean, by definition, almost everybody was new to PCs, not just to Quicken.
Yes, and we were building on the IBM PC, which virtually no one had.
So, how quickly was it clear that you were onto something this company might succeed? Was that obvious from the start?
Well, it was obvious for those of us in the company until we launched. And then things didn't work very well. Turns out back then you had to go through software distribution to get out the software stores and computer stores, and nobody would take our products. We had no money. The VCs all turned us down. We talked to over 24 venture capitalists here locally, and they all turned us down. Even my high school, excuse me, even my grad school roommate was a VC turned me down. And so we had no money, so we couldn't get into distribution, and the other products were already out there. So it was really a struggle. The little amount of money that I got from retirement borrowed from my parents, we ran through that. We had to return the rented computers and rent furniture. We brought in card tables, as those were our desks. We used crates of unsold product as printer stands. And we had lots of crates of unsold product. So, I later found a bank statement from August of that year, and I think we had like $17 in that.
Were there any near-death experiences along the way?
Yeah,
times when it was not clear?
Yeah, we'd stopped paying salaries. I went to folks saying, look, we're out of money, and I'll pay you for the time you work, but, you know, it's not a layoff. I'd dearly love you to stay, but, you know, some of you might have to get work that actually pays. And so 4 of the 7 of us, 4 stayed, and worked through that 6 months where we had no pay. So, yeah, it looked like a certain thing.
And then was there a magic moment that you can define looking back when you knew that you succeeded? And I assume you did get into distribution eventually.
There was not actually a magic moment. We didn't have the resources to change the product, so we had the same product. Because Tom, my co-founder, who did the engineering, well, we were so busy just trying to handle the business, he didn't have time to code that, trying to save things. We eventually got some distribution through banks. Banks started selling it to their customers. But it turns out banks are terrible selling software. It's not their business, so that didn't work. But that got a little word of mouth. And then from the bank stuff, we finally saved a little money that we decided we were going to get big or get out. So I got a friend to teach me, a friend from E&G to teach me how to write direct response ads. And I wrote, because we couldn't afford an ad agency, I wrote the ads, print ads, went in the computer magazines.
Those ads with lots and lots of text.
Yeah, lots and lots of text, yeah. And that started to work. Those ads, we could track the exact, the advertising I like is the advertising you exactly track. Unlike a Super Bowl ad we ran last week. But the ads I like are the ones you can track. And and you can actually track it and they would pay back, which is a rare feat in advertising. But actually, as we went back and looked at the numbers, what actually saved us, the reason most people were buying the product was word of mouth. Word of mouth. So through the banks, we got a few people use it, they told their friends, and the business started tripling every year, triple. And when you have lots of demand, then software distribution is easy. So then things just took off.
And was your competition in the early days, I mean, was it a checkbook register as much as it was anything else?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You had to convince people about this idea of using the computer to do this at all?
Yeah, the 24 products that were out, virtually nobody used because they didn't want it to be, consumers didn't want it to be complicated, hard, and slow. Like, duh. So they didn't use them. So the only real competition we had in the minds of customers was the pencil and the checkbook. But that means it's a big habit change. So that's why ultimately they really had to hear from a friend. And that kind of instilled my belief that brands are built by your product and what others say about it, not built by what you say about yourself.
So it was a viral success the next day. It's just the virality didn't happen quite as quickly as it can happen today.
Yeah, exactly. We couldn't get trial early on, so it took off on word of mouth, but that took a while to get started.
So McCracken eventually did become a big success, and then in the 90s you launched QuickBooks, which, I mean, it didn't just redefine Intuit, it really kind of changed how small businesses ran themselves. Was that a happy accident, or did you see an opportunity to do something kind of transformative?
No, it was totally an accident. And it's taught me, in the words of the former dean of the Harvard Business School, this thing of savoring surprises. But I didn't know that at the time. So we made Quicken. It was a home product. We sold it in a garish orange box. It looked like a Tide box. That's where I got that idea. Did not look like a business product. And we sold it as a consumer product. But in the tracking studies we did, half the users claimed to be businesses, or actually claimed to be using it in an office. They're probably just using the computer they have on their desk in the office, because most homes didn't have computers. And we ignored it. Every subsequent tracking study showed the same thing. Half the users said they were using it in Office. Ignored it. I ignored it. Years later, it got to me. Why are people answering this question wrong? So then we started to investigate. We went out and interviewed the people who had answered the question. We went to visit them and see what was going on. And the reality was, they weren't doing homework. They were on a home problem. Then we had to figure out why, because there's dozens of accounting software products out there at the time. We had to figure out why. And it turns out, well, let's do a little survey right here. How many of you took accounting in school? Raise your hand if you took accounting in school. Okay. Keep your hand if you loved accounting, really like it. Okay. There's always a couple, and that's good. The rest of you are called normal. Because it's not natural for anyone to deal with debits and credits, and ledgers and journals, and posting and closes. Most people know how to close windows and doors. They don't know how to close books, and they don't know why they ever would. And in a small startup, or a small company, 5, 10, 20 employees, you don't have room for a CPA. So the books are kept by an unfortunate or unlucky clerk, a spouse, an office manager, or the owner. And the vast majority of cases, these people think the general ledger is a World War II hero. So they were using Quicken because we promised to keep your books like a checkbook, like you already know. We never designed it for business. So we said, wait a minute, what if we actually took the same concept, now that we know the giant unsolved problem is people need to keep books in English rather than in accounting, which they don't understand. What if we actually built a problem to solve that problem? We did. We launched it in QuickBooks in 1991. And the launch was a total failure. The unknown brand name, we were selling it at twice the price of the market leader, and we had a third as many features. The advertising didn't work at all. We removed the first ad, ran another one, an ad agency had done it for us. In PC Magazine, million circulation, largest trade journal in the world. We got 4 responses. 4. I'm pretty convinced if we'd run just a blank white page with an 800 number, we would have gotten better than 4 responses. I think the large picture of the bald-headed lady actually drove people away. Then we found out a few weeks after launch that customers started calling and they were really mad because it turns out there were some bugs. You'd enter all your business data for weeks, and then all of a sudden, 1 second, poof, it was all gone. Gone. Everything. Yeah, this was the great launch of, and that meant everybody called, and which means the lines were so jammed you couldn't get through. So we were scrambling. So we doubled the size of the tech support department in a week, which training was easy because we only had to train on one question: where the bleep is my data? The engineering team figured out the root cause of the problem, and we sent out re-releases to people, and but that was the great start we had for QuickBooks. The intriguing thing is to then look at what happened in the business numbers. At the time, there was very good market share data because all software was sold through a collection of retailers that all reported their sales to a central neutral party. By the end of the second month, QuickBooks was outselling the former market leader 2-to-1. Unbelievable. And we never, ever, even though we cut the advertising and all that stuff, we never, ever got below that. So we started at twice the market share of the market leader. And today, about 94% of the accounting systems used by small businesses are QuickBooks. And if you look back, it's all because we solved the biggest problem, which was put it in plain English, make it look like an invoice, like a check. And we only did that because of the surprise. The surprise that we tried to ignore, I ignored for years. We finally paid attention to the surprise. We discovered this whole opportunity we had never.
So let's fast forward to the current century and the period a few years ago when personal finance was going online. You would pick an online, and there was a really cool startup called Mint. And it looked like those 2 products might be arch rivals, but really rather quickly, you bought Mint. And instead of doing what large companies do a lot of the time when they buy a startup, which is extinguishing it, you kept the product, you kept the brand. It seemed like you pretty quickly decided there was more opportunity in Mint than Quicken Online. Can you talk about not just the decision to acquire Mint, but also the decision to handle it the way you did?
Yeah, we blew the Quicken Online chapters. Mint beat us fair and square. And Mint also had an altered business model that we really intrigued by. So we really loved the team, we loved their approach. So we acquired them, and we then gave the Mint team responsibility for not just Mint, but for Quicken. Figured, let's get those new ideas, that DNA, deeply into the company. So Quicken then reported to the Mint team. And that's turned out as we would have hoped, behind the range. Mint has grown, I think, 8-fold since we acquired it. And then we've taken the business model and used the Mint team to teach the rest of the company. So we're now deploying that revenue model in other parts of the business. And we've actually worked to mintify a bunch of our businesses. So if any of you are a new sign-up to QuickBooks Online, so now all the emphasis we have for QuickBooks is on QuickBooks Online. And the very latest version that debuted in November has a whole new user interface, user design, vastly modernized, simplified, and basically on a Mint design. And that is the future of QuickBooks. Existing QuickBooks users will get that interface in the months ahead. But right now, all new users get it. So that it's been, you're right, it has, like QuickBooks was transformative, the Mint acquisition has, as we had hoped, been transformative to us.
So when I think about Intuit, I think about a company that works harder than most to listen to its customers. I've been to some of the town halls you hold. Does that date back to the 1980s, or is that something you developed along the way? I think you've already touched on some earlier examples of you listening to people.
Yeah, so it started with the very beginning in '83 when we started doing the research to understand what consumers actually did, the usability studies that we didn't call usability. What's changed is our methods have advanced with the ability to get data from all of our online businesses. One thing I've learned is to trust behaviors. If there's a lesson I've gotten in the last 30 years on understanding customers, is to focus on their behaviors, not their words. We in our payroll division, we're the largest provider of payroll services to companies in the United States. A business that we incubated inside and grew. And when you start up payroll, you've got a bunch of questions you got to answer, data you got to put in so that we can do the payroll checks accurately. The whole industry does that. Unfortunately, we found out that when people arrive at our site, new customers, they want to, it's payday. 60% of them arrive on payday, which means they want their paychecks immediately. But the payroll industry is set up to give you paychecks in 2 days, the first day. And so we acquired, very late in our history, a small startup who did payroll well. And one of their engineers had the idea, well, let's flip it. Why force people to do all that setup stuff? The new customer, when all they want to do is cut paychecks, let's cut paychecks first and then do setup later, and correcting everything later. There's a lot of technical work needed to pull that off, but that was his idea. Well, he tried to get his startup that he was at to do it, and they wouldn't. He said, nobody ever does that. This is not blah, 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 we're not going to do it. So once we acquired it, we've adopted an experimentalist approach. So we free people to run experiments. So with that new freedom, he dusted this idea off. They did a little consumer research where they showed a high-quality mock-up to 20 payroll customers. 0 for 20 said they used his flipped startup method. 0. But he really believed it. And we had Eric Reese coaching teams as we were trying to gear up and get the experimentalist approach working. And one of the teams was his. And so Eric talked through with them what could be rapid testing. And 24 hours later, they did a rapid test. In that rapid test, when you just offer it to people, don't ask if it would, but take the actual stream of new customers and offer it. You want the old way or the new way? 58% chose the new way. Now, the new way didn't work yet. It was just a screen. So we had to apologize for those folks. But that 58% did what the survey said 0% would do. So that gave us the team and the boldness to build it. They built it out. Now the payroll division's had its fastest growth in 10 years. So what I've learned is don't focus on asking people what they might or would or could or should do. Look what they actually do. And then, if you've got something you want to try, make it an experiment to see what people actually do. Real people, really choosing for real, with real time and money. And base your decisions on that. So that's been my biggest learning about customer version in the last decade.
Scott, how do you define your own role within Intuit? It seems like you're comfortable not micromanaging this thing you created. What do you bring to the table, and how did you figure that out over the years?
I'm still trying to figure out what I bring to the table. But, so I was CEO for the first 11 years, but then since then have hired and or promoted folks to be CEOs. Right now, our current CEO, Brad Smith, is phenomenal. He's so much better than I would be in the same job. So I help him, and I help folks in the company. A lot of my recent focus has been to we run internally as a network of startups and really help build the skills of our internal entrepreneurs about how to be successful entrepreneurs. And then create the environment around them so they can experiment and innovate rapidly. Just yesterday I was met with one team and coached 4 of our internal startup teams. One team's fun, it's a husband and wife team. It's kind of fun. So that's a lot of what I do. And then try to extract what's the learning about how you succeed as an entrepreneur. What are the kind of guideposts that our internal startups, we have about over 200 internal startup teams inside the company. And then try to teach and make those approaches become happen, easy. So I brought along an example of how that works. We're actually going to look at some of the learnings and how we try to operationalize being an entrepreneur. Let's see if this works. Okay, so one thing I've come to believe, so we're going to actually do the actual things that I do with some of the entrepreneurs in the company. One thing I've come to believe is that entrepreneurship is the intersection of 3 circles, which hopefully will rise on the screen. Okay. Underneath your chairs, we have a backup plan. Underneath your chairs might be a white envelope taped underneath your chairs. Okay. Now, take out what's in there. A few of you may have something saying you win a prize. And I've got the prizes right here. So the prizes are a Google Chromecast. If you don't have one, this is the fastest selling electronics item at Amazon. So some of the envelopes may have a little indication that you're a prize winner. If you have that, stand up and show it. Let's see if anyone got something right there. Yes. Can you catch? There you go. Anyone else have one? Anyone else? No one else has it? Now look carefully. Look carefully. Any other winners out there? Okay, we may give some of these out later then. Okay. Now, here we go, slides. So I think successful entrepreneurship lives in the intersection of 3 circles. I went back and studied all our new businesses, the flops and the winners, and the thing that made the winners different was each one of the winners found an important but unsolved problem for the customer, and a problem that we could solve, and where we thought we could build durable advantage, so we didn't get crushed by some competitor. So that's the sweet spot. So to operationalize that, you'll notice in your group there's a sheet that we give out. People can fill it in, or they don't have to, but it helps focus people on what the vision is. So I'm going to ask you to take out your pens, and we're going to do a little case, and you're going to get to fill it out. I'll ask you in a moment to begin filling out these 2 sections. What's the big problem? And why do you believe you can solve it? Now we're going to do a real case history here, the invention of the iPod. So that's the successful product. But what was the situation that Tony Fadell and John Rubinstein encountered? Pre-iPod, what was the situation for people who wanted to listen to mobile digital music? Here is a Wired magazine article that describes the situation as it existed in 2000. I think you have a copy in your deck there. So read that article and then figure out how you'd fill out what the problem is and then what the solution could be. And there's a hint. I put bold type on things to pay attention to. Okay, for speed, you guys can finish it later. I'll show you somewhere in here is a draft. Well, there was a draft in the deck that I guess is missing. But that article lists all the problems, and Apple had most of the gear, or could acquire most of the stuff that needed to solve it, and to solve pretty much every problem that's identified. Interestingly, on the bottom one, is there a network effect there? There really wasn't one. Okay, let's go to the next thing we asked teams to do. We're big believers in the experimentalist approach. We were working on this starting in 2007. We started rolling out the company in 2008. In 2009, I discovered Eric Ries, and I found a video online and said, oh my God, this guy is talking about the same thing. He just explains it better and has thought more thoroughly about it. So one of the first things you got to have is a vision. So that's why we start with the vision that we just worked on. Early in the process, though, you've got to translate that vision into what are the leaps of faith. So what are the assumptions that have to be true for this idea to work big time? And which of those then are leaps of faith, or the ones that really aren't documented or good evidence for? So that's what we're going to work on our next little practice session. So now we're going to go back to 2009 and a situation in our TurboTax division. So we make TurboTax. TurboTax, historically, it's a web app that you use in your browser. Historically, it requires you to fill in a bunch of boxes and type in a bunch of numbers. These, for example, being the numbers you have to type in off your W-2. Okay, a team had a vision, a team in our San Diego unit that makes TurboTax. Can we do taxes without typing? Could we suck the data in, freeing the user from having to type all that stuff in, freeing the user from having even to read the forms? So the idea was, so we know it's a hassle to do. We know that it keeps people from using TurboTax. We also know that the pure online will take us years to do because there's so many data sources. They're so diffuse. There are 100,000 points of data origination for tax data in the country. And we've been already working 5 years to wire up payrolls so you can get your W-2 electronically. And after 5 years, we have about 1/3 of the paychecks in the United States. So the rest of the documents would take us 5 to 10 years more. So this team said, let's not wait for that. Let's use OCR. People now have phones. Phones have cameras. Now, in 2009, they were pretty shoddy cameras, but they got cameras. Can we use the phone to suck the data off documents and fill it into TurboTax Online? So that was the vision document. And if you could do that, you could save people a lot of time and a lot of hassle. Okay. So the next piece becomes the leap of faith worksheet. I filled out the top. And now if you could go to the blank one and say, what are the leap of faith, what are the assumptions? What has to be true in order for this idea to work big time? And write those down in that big box that says assumptions. Now I'll give you 4 minutes. About another minute. Okay, so what were some of the assumptions that have to be true for this idea to work big time? Raise your hand. Yes, sir?
You need a really small error rate.
Yes, you have to have a very low error rate. What were other assumptions? Yes?
The user has an iPhone or some other thing.
Yeah, the user has to have a device that can do this. Other assumptions? Yes?
Transmission needs to be secure.
The transmission needs to be secure, so people don't worry about it. Yep. Yes, sir?
Changes behavior.
Yes, there's a behavior change here. One, the use of a phone, and also interrupting. You're working away in TurboTax Online, and then you got to take out your phone and do some stuff, and then you got to go back to TurboTax Online. So a series of behavior. Now, the team had already talked to taxpayers, and taxpayers did not want to do taxes on the phone. They said, no, that's not going to work. So the whole idea was, could this be a data acquisition add-on to TurboTax? Okay, so those are a whole bunch of these, and in fact, they were all the kind of crucial delight hypotheses. If you couldn't get these to work, so the team started testing. There was real doubt in the engineering organization whether this was even feasible, because the cameras were cruddy, the W-2 forms were ugly and poorly printed, the lighting wasn't very good. They had to do stuff. This wasn't OCR done locally. The OCR was done off a server, so you had to transmit enough of the image. Could it be fast enough? So the team started experimenting. Most of the technology vendors they talked to thought it could not be done. In the process of experimenting on the accuracy question, which was the major first one they had to tackle, they mocked it up so that they could have actual users kind of test drive the experience. And the users would start in TurboTax, take out their phone, they'd take some pictures and do that. And then the user's reaction in these tests was odd. The users started saying, okay, so I got the phone out, I'm doing this, I want to keep going on my phone. Which, remember, is the total opposite of what they told us when we surveyed them earlier. Another proof you can't trust surveys. So the team switched their emphasis to saying, why get people to go back and forth from TurboTax Online to the phone and back? Let's build it all into the phone. So in 2010, they debuted this thing called SnapTax. They take a simple tax return, 1040EZ, and now it'll do 1040EZ and A, and do your taxes entirely on the phone using this technology, which they got to work. And here is, so they continued the experiments and learning. This team became an experimentation machine, and here's what they came up with. And let's see if it's, well, there's a little video that's supposed to play here. Oh well, we can skip the video, but the result is on the Apple App Store and the Google Play, and it's the highest rated thing we have ever built. Consistently 5 stars, I just checked this morning again, and the reviews are unlike anything I've seen before. One guy, lots of people say they're done in 10 minutes with their taxes. One guy said, I just finished my taxes in the bathtub. Another woman said, I'm in the recovery room after surgery, and I just finished my taxes. And my favorite was a guy 2 years ago on February 14th. And he wrote in saying, I just finished taxes in bed with my girlfriend. She's so excited she might even wear the gift I just gave her. Because it was Valentine's Day. So, all because of a team that didn't take no for an answer and kept running experiments. So there's a URL up there. Let's see if we can get the URL. So you can get copies of these documents. Well, maybe in the back they can bring up the final page. There it is. And with that, why don't we move to questions?
Yeah, any questions from the audience? Yes, sir.
At what stage do you actually have to accept no as an answer? You have to move on to the next one.
At what stage do you
Have to accept no as an answer.
at what stage do you accept no as an answer?
So do you give up?
So this would be in the process of running experiments. What we coach teams to do is, when the experiment doesn't work as you expected, and most don't, then your job is to go in and understand why. What's the root cause? Look for surprises. If, in doing that, it confirms that the problem is still a real problem, then there's probably something wrong about your solution, and keep trying. It might confirm the solution, that the problem just isn't the problem you thought, in which case it's a good reason to pivot to a totally new problem. But the answer is all in the diagnosis of the root cause to why it didn't work.
Yes, the gentleman in red there.
So you guys have the new online app where if a third party wants to integrate with QuickBooks Online, right?
It's a little hard to hear.
Oh, sorry. Is it better?
Yeah, it is.
Okay. So you guys have a new QuickBooks Online environment where if a third party web app needs to integrate with QuickBooks Online,
Yes.
that's great, but I have a very fundamental issue. Why do I have to pay you to use the API, which your customer is already paying you to use it,
Yeah.
and I'm creating the API?
Yeah, I think we just dropped the charges to zero.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that was a good point. I agree.
I'm Sasha, I'm the founder of Eversnap, and I had a question. In those 6 months that you guys were out of money, how many people did you have on your team, and how did you get them to keep on working with you, and what was the reason that investors were telling you no?
And what was the reason?
The investors were telling you no.
Well, what was the reason investors were telling us no? I'll do that in the second part of your question. It's not hard to understand when you step back. Venture capital at the time, this is 1984, almost entirely funded industrial products, semiconductors, stuff sold to corporations. They had virtually never sold a consumer, backed a consumer product. Even personal computers at the time, the initial audiences and users were in corporations. And we were saying, we were selling to consumers. And we wanted to put all the money into TV advertising. And VCs had no experience in advertising. So you probably shouldn't invest in something you really don't understand. Also, we had a team who had no background in doing this. I was a former fat oil salesman from P&G, and my co-founder had just graduated hadn't yet graduated from Stanford. So we didn't look like the dream team. So I think there's good reasons why they didn't invest. Plus, the dominant mentality at the time was software was sold by the pound. The more features, the better. And we were going in the exact opposite direction. So we were going to sell products with vastly fewer features to ensure that they were delightfully easy. And that message fell on deaf ears in the investment community. So then, how did people keep going? We had 7 employees. We shrunk to 4 when we stopped paying salary. I guess fundamentally they just believed that we had a better solution. Our solution would transform people's financial lives, and competitors would not. The fundamental thing is they just believed.
Well, thank you, audience. Those were great questions, and thank you, Scott, so much. This was just fabulous.
Okay, who can catch really well? Way in back. Whoops. Okay, catch. No, be careful. I get way over. Okay, right here. Oh, watch it. Very good. Got it, guys.